Good afternoon. Another beautiful day. The northern rivers of Australia, this time from Fingal Beach, just south of Tweed in Coolangatta, not far from Kingscliff. Today, another video on my two foundational principles. Number one principle, that true health comes from living in harmony with nature's rhythms, consistent with the Gaia theory, which says that all living organisms and their inorganic surroundings have evolved together as a single living system. Also consistent with a statement by neuroscientist Carl Friston that the anatomy of any system must contain within it a model of the environment from which it is immersed, which means that the universe is made up of fractal patterns, which means that we are part of the universe and the universe is part of us. And of course, my second foundational principle, that Bitcoin is money for the people, by the people. It is a decentralized, permissionless, immutable part of the peaceful revolution. So let's have a look at the three scientific studies I want to talk about today. The first one concerns the sun and protecting the skin. So I'm always out in the sun, as you know, getting the health benefits of being in the sun. I'm also very careful to put my sun tonic on my skin, get out of the sun when my skin gets pink or hot. And I also use my diet, because the studies have shown that certain phytochemicals in food help protect the skin from the sun. And the number one phytochemical that does that is lycopene. And the number one source of lycopene in our diet is tomatoes. And that lycopene builds up, that we consume internally, builds up in our skin and protects our skin from non-melanoma skin cancers. Now, interestingly, the studies also showed that taking lycopene in a capsule didn't work. You had to get the lycopene from eating tomatoes. And that is a great example of what I always talk about, and what I used to talk about with Roby Mitchell, was the entourage effect, which means that individual components of food, the sum of those components, have a greater effect than the components alone, which means that 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2. 1 + 1 equals 3 when they're together. So that's the entourage effect, which is indifferent to the intelligent design of the body, which means that one phytochemical may have multiple effects and in the body. So that means that one nutrient, one hormone, won't just have a single effect in the body, but will have multiple effects in the body. And the best example of that I've been writing about a lot recently is melatonin. And there was two great studies about melatonin out this week. And in fact, I've been writing a lot about melatonin recently because there's now building evidence that melatonin just doesn't come from the pineal gland, where we used to think that it comes from, but also comes from all our mitochondria, that mitochondria can produce their own melatonin. And mitochondria do that because mitochondria burn food for energy. And like any engine that does that, when it burns fuel for energy, it creates some pollution. And melatonin is probably the body's most powerful antioxidant to neutralize that pollution. So the mitochondria, in all their wisdom, not only produce energy by burning fuel, but they also produce the antioxidant melatonin to help neutralize that pollution. And the studies this week, the first one was about melatonin in the lungs. So we all know about melatonin in sleep, that it's hormone released from our pineal gland that puts us to sleep. But it turns out that melatonin is also in our respiratory tract, in our nose, in our lungs. And what the melatonin does there is it stops viruses from infecting the cells in our lungs and respiratory tract. So the virus arrives, sits there, can't get into the body, and then buggers off. Doesn't infect us. So in fact, I've long talked about our three defense systems before viruses get to our cells. The first three lines of defense I've always talked about as being vitamin A, which optimize the function of the cilia in our lungs, which sweep rubbish out of the lungs. I've talked about vitamin D, which activates the cathelicidins in the macrophages, the patrolling marines of the body, which recognize the foreign invader, and then the cathelicidins, which is activated by vitamin D from the sun, tears apart that virus and presents part of those viruses, the dead viruses, to our immune system to develop antibodies for. And then the third one was zinc and iodine in the bloodstream, which are directly virucidal. They attack the outer membrane of the viruses. But now we can add a fourth one to that, which is melatonin in our lungs, which stops the viruses from getting into the body at all. The second study on melatonin concerned weight loss. So again, another sign of the intelligent design of the body, where melatonin has multiple effects, not just one effect in the body. And what we discovered with melatonin and weight loss, and this is one of the reasons why, understanding this is one of the reasons why I was able to lose, what did I lose? I lost 16 kilos in just under 40 days by understanding some of these principles. And what melatonin does, melatonin is epigenetic. Our genes code for our proteins, but they can be switched on or switched off. And what we found with melatonin is that melatonin switches on the genes for lipolysis, the genes which burn fat in our fat cells, and switches off the genes for lipogenesis, which are the genes which store excess fat in our fat cells. So what I do is, obviously, I make my own melatonin, I get it for free, and I do that by exposing myself to natural light, hello, big orange ball in the sky, and minimizing my exposure to artificial blue light after it gets dark at night, because that shuts down my melatonin production. And the last thing I wanted to talk about was Bitcoin, because I was listening to a podcast I was listening to the Orange Pool podcast today with Max Kaiser and Stacey Herbert, and they were talking about that Bitcoin really has no benefit other than being a store of value. So Bitcoin is a very good money, because we know the characteristics that we want out of money are that it's divisible, it's durable, it's portable, it's recognizable, and it's scarce. And Bitcoin is perfect for all of those. Whereas dollars, the big problem with dollars is that they're not scarce. We can print as many as we need whenever we want them. Trouble with that is it leads to hyperinflation, obviously. Everything starts to cost us more. Whereas Bitcoin has no utility other than it's a store of value. Because you can get into problems with utility. Like Max was saying, that silver is a problem, because the more the price of silver goes up, because silver is used as a utility, it's used to make solar panels, it's used to make batteries and electric cars. So as the price of silver goes up, so too does the cost of solar panels and electric cars. Whereas Bitcoin has no utility other than being a store of value, and it is such a great store of value because it is scarce. There will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin, each Bitcoin divisible into 100 million Satoshis. So nobody's buying Bitcoin. I'm not buying Bitcoin. I buy a few Satoshis when I can. And there'll never be more than 21 million. So it's scarce, and it's not affected by its use as a utility, which is one of the reasons why it's one of my foundational principles that I talk about in those videos. Alright, I hope you enjoyed the video today. Like the video, share it, because that information about melatonin is very, very important. And peace and love, and I'll see you next week. Bye.